So we discussed about the learning phase. That was the difficult part for me to explain to you all of that. Now we go to the easy part. Everywhere, all over the internet, you're going to see people talking about 20% scaling. Of course, they don't take the time to explain to you what is the learning phase and where is it based. But the 20% means that if you are having something spending 100 and you want to scale it in order for you, if you pass the learning phase, but they don't explain to you if you pass the learning phase or not, but let's say you have to scale with the 20% plus 20% in order for you not to pass the learning phase, which is 120. Okay, I pick my example so that I can be able to do the maths. Now, this is the 20% that they say that you're not exiting the learning phase. So how can you exit the learning phase? Either based on them by increasing more than 20% the campaign, that means that you go back to the learning phase because you increased too aggressively, or by just doing any major change, of course, like changing even a comma, it's considered a major change, changing your targeting, adding a lookalike or stuff like that. The only thing that is not resetting your ads is changing the name of your campaigns, ads, ad sets, even changing the date. I think it's not going to, the ending date, for example, and stuff like that, it's not going to reset and take it back to learning phase. Now, a lot of times, again, like the learning phase not needing always necessarily 50 events, I have seen that even if you increase higher, sometimes, especially in higher budget, it doesn't matter and it doesn't get you back to the learning phase. Again, I don't believe in the learning phase. We said it in the previous one. I haven't seen any big differences. But let me explain to you when I'm going to use the 20% rule over here, because there are some times that I believe that, look, I don't want to scale that much and actually ruin the balance of the campaign and stuff and be super aggressive. I want to do it in a more conservative way. This is the point that I will use the 20%. But when I have passed the learning phase or when I'm in bigger budgets, I will explain. Let's say, for example, that people are proposing to use the 20% rule anytime, okay? So there are times, for example, that you're going to spend $10, for example, okay? And let's say that this is an ABO. You're going to spend $10 over here. And let's say that your cost per purchase is 10. The cost per purchase, okay? Now, that means that you have 7 sales in the course of your attribution setting, which is 7 days click, 1 day view, as we said. You didn't pass the learning phase. You didn't pass the learning phase. So what's the point of using the 20% rule and here going from 10 to 12? Okay, there's no point of doing that, because what is going to happen is that your cost per purchase instead of 10 is going to go to 12, just because you're increasing a little bit. So using the 20% rule makes no sense. Also, the people telling you to use the 20% rule, if you haven't passed the learning phase, they don't even know what they're talking about, because the 20% rule is coming from the fact that you're using it so that you don't go back to the learning phase. I have 2 examples over here. Let's say that we run an ASC. This is basically an ABO. Okay, so we run an ASC for 400 spent, and what we're having is a cost per purchase of 100, okay, in this case. Now, in this case, it means that we're getting 28 sales in the course of 7 days, okay, 4 sales per day. That means that we haven't passed the learning phase. But if we come here and we make this 50, let's say that we have 50, that means that we are passing the learning phase. Why am I saying this? Because if you come here and you increase by 120 because of the, the cost per purchase is that. Let's say that you increase over here to 480, okay? Because this is what you have. What is going to happen most likely is that you're not going to go to 5 sales per day. Either you will go to 5 sales per day, which means that because you did this change, you managed to have a cost per purchase of 90, most likely, I believe, 96, I was close, okay? So you're having a cost per purchase of 96 over here. Either this one is going to drop or it's going to increase, and still you're going to have 4 sales divided with 4, which means that this is going to go with 5 sales to 96, or it's going to go with 4 sales to 120, I believe. Yes, that was easy. So you go to 120. What does this mean? That if you just increase and you still have 4 sales per day, you manage to make your campaign more expensive and still not pass the learning phase while you're using the 20% rule, which is coming from the learning phase. This is what makes no sense. On the other hand, if you're having, let's say here, an example 2, which is the crazy method, and you're having 100 spent over here and 5 ad sets, 20 cost per purchase, this means that you need, in all of those 5 ad sets, 50 sales. Guess what? It's not going to happen. And if you're using the crazy method, or if you are using my methods, this is why we don't care about the learning phase, because we are working with other things and we don't care about that. Now, there is no need to say that if you go and you increase to 120 over here, you're having better chances because you're having 5 assets and maybe it's going to be diluted within this. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to put 2 examples. If you have a cost per purchase of 200 and you just increase with the 20% rule to 240 and your cost per purchase is this, then sorry my friend, but you're stupid. Because basically it's like you're asking for a cost per purchase to go to 240. No, I'm going to increase with either 150 to go to 350 to 400 because my cost per purchase is 200. Now, you might say, what are you selling for 200? Yes, there are people over here that they're selling something and they have a cost per purchase of 200. Let's say, for example, that they are selling a very expensive sofa or a course like mine, for example, okay, which is valued at 1,500. I'm guessing this is the cost per purchase that I will get when I'm going to start selling it. I'm not going to say no to a 50 cost per purchase for my course, okay, having very good ROAS. But if I'm having this, I'm not going to increase with the 20% rule because over here, this is what is healthy for me and this is what is more possible to happen. Here, what I'm asking is either 240 cost per purchase or 120 cost per purchase, which means that I'm either saying to Facebook, give me 2 sales per day with 120 or 1 sale with more money because it's not going to be enough. And yes, maybe some days it's going to get 1 sale, 2 sales, 3 sales, but this is not my point and what I'm trying to prove. On the other hand, if you're having over here 400 spent, okay, or maybe let's put 100 spent and your cost per purchase is 30 and you increase with the 20% rule, you go to 120, fine. You know, you're very close to your CPC, CPP, perfect, okay? But if you're having over here 100 and your cost per purchase is 80, as you can understand, by just doing an increase with 20%, basically you are also limiting yourself and you are spending more from what Facebook can give you because this is not the average cost per purchase that you are getting. Let's go into my PC, let me show you some other accounts and how there are different numbers and when to use the 20% rule or not. But just to recap over here, I want to say this. Think, okay? That's the whole point of the course, to make you think, to make you understand why you are using this or that. Are you having a cost per purchase of 20? I don't care, you can scale with a 20% rule, you can scale with whatever. Of course, if you're just spending $20 and you just scale with a 20% rule, you will scale to 24. So you will go 24, 28, 32, and so on, okay? These are times that you should not just do that again and again. This is the point that you do. 20, okay, 50. Okay, next time, 100. Okay, and you're increasing like this, something that makes sense if you divide it with your average cost per purchase. Okay, but it doesn't make any sense for you to just come here and just increase it by $2 all the time because it's not going to make any significant difference and you're just happy that you're scaling, but basically you're not scaling, you're not doing serious stuff into your ad account. So see your cost per purchase and decide if you want to use it or not. If you're using the crazy method, don't care about the 20% rule. There is no point unless if you end up optimizing and instead of having 5 you just left with only 1 over here added after optimization. Okay, but at the end of the day, if you're using this, you don't need the 20% rule. You're just scaling based on the cost per purchase. Of course, as strategy we do use several campaigns, you know, and we are scaling with different creatives and stuff. You will see later on the daily loop theory and everything. The last thing that I need to say is that on bigger AOV items, maybe it makes sense to use the 20% rule, but in bigger numbers. So if you're spending, for example, 500 and we are using the 20% rule, then that means that we're going to put another 100 over here, okay? So it's going to be 600. But if you're having these spends over here, you can use the 20% rule because you pass the learning phase, makes total sense. You are using something that is not, it's not a small increase, okay? If you're spending, for example, 1,000, okay, you can do 1,200. Makes more sense there to do this kind of scaling with the 20% rule to the bigger numbers. To the smaller spends, makes no sense. You haven't passed the learning phase, you're not going to be benefited, most probably it's going to be more expensive. If it makes sense because of your average cost per purchase, go and do it if you feel better. When am I using it? In other accounts that they are stable and they are doing well, sometimes for psychological reasons, I'm going to use the 20% scaling just because I feel like I don't want to mess the campaign or do something really aggressive which is going to ruin it and stuff. I'm working with multiple campaigns on the other accounts, as you know, and I just want to have the peace of mind that I haven't done something super aggressive. This is the way that I will use it. But it has to be campaigns that they spend more than 300, 400, 500, 800, 1000 ASC campaigns. Yes, at this point I might use the 20% rule. On smaller numbers, if I spend 100, I might do 150, 200, depending on my average cost per purchase, without even calculating what is the 20% rule. I'm still seeing to this day agencies, and I'm seeing, for example, scalings inside. I'm seeing 46.7. Then they do 49.3. I'm seeing some crazy stuff like that. There are people that they are using this just exactly even with the decimals over here. And I'm seeing other people that because they're afraid of the 20%, they calculate 19%. Okay, because they're going to cheat. Okay, and the 20%, maybe it means that in 20% it's not that, you know. And I believe that Meta has also a different range over here. I don't believe that if you do 25%, it's going to take you back to the learning phase and so on. After all, this proves my point. The learning phase is just a lie, which is being used by them in order to make you spend more money and just give you another goal, like a game that you have to reach. Let's go into my PC to see some examples and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to show you two ad accounts. I don't want to make this super long. Over here, for example, you might see that the AOV is pretty high, okay? So it's 500, 700, that's why you see such good ROAS. Break-even ROAS of that account here is 4, so obviously it can scale more, but look a little bit on the cost per purchase, okay? So these are cold traffic ads, cold, retargeting, cold. So all of these are cold, okay? So we have 69, let's say that we take the 70, I'm seeing some 50, 60 and stuff. Now, what it makes more sense here if I'm spending, for example, 300 over here, okay? If we do calculate, sorry for that. So if we do 300 and we divide that with, let's say 70, then we get 4.2, okay? 4.2 sales. Okay, now here, what makes more sense is to increase by 100 more, for example, okay? So we go to 400, okay? And if we do 400 divide with 70, we are getting 5.7. Perfect, okay? Maybe we will reach 6 sales, okay? We will have better results. Of course, here it's another account that we have fluctuation of AOV and we can be more flexible. But over here, what makes sense is to just increase by 100 and not just do 300 multiplied with 0.2, which is 360. And yes, that's the point, that in this case, for example, if you do 360, because it's higher number, let's see also how many sales it has on the last 7 days, by the way. Let's go on this one. So this one, is it in learning limited? Let's see. No, it's active. So at some point it has passed the 50 sales. Right now it has 53. Okay, so it passed the learning phase over here. Okay, now in this one, if you increase from 300, for example, okay, to 360 while having 39 cost per purchase, guess what? It's going to work. That's the problem with the 20%. People do it. They don't understand why they do it. A lot of times it's working because, you know, it's just going to work because of numbers. But my point is that you need to know what you're doing. Also, the 20% rule is not going to be discussed only based on how much you spend at the cost per purchase, but also on the ROAS. I'm having 17 ROAS here over the last 7 days. If I scale this to 400, for example, or 450, it's a safe bet while my break-even ROAS is 4 and I want 6. Okay, so there is no point of discussing why should I increase with the 20% when I have so much room over here. Okay, let's see, for example, another campaign. Let's go to this one, okay? Let's see how many. So this one last 7 days has 26. Okay, let's see if it has passed the learning phase. It's active, which means that it passed the learning phase with less events. Over here, what we're seeing is that how much is it spending? It's spending 400, okay? So here you're going to go for 480, okay? 100, even here with 480, it makes sense. What have I said? In smaller numbers, it does make total sense. Okay, now let's go and see another account just so that you can understand where it doesn't make sense. Okay, for example, let's see this example over here. Here we're having 100, we're having 3 rows, it's very good rows, but we're having a cost per purchase of 53. If we increase with the 20% rule, we're getting this to 120 per day, which means that it's not enough for this, because with 53 we're getting 2 sales with the 100. But in the same ad account, if we go and we just do this scaling over here from 100 to 120 while having 27 cost per purchase, it makes sense. What I'm trying to prove over here, guys, is that the 20% rule is just a rule about the learning phase. By the way, how many sales do we have here? 11. See, we're still on learning. This is the bar that I was talking to you about, okay? So it's trying to incentivize you to do that. Let's see another one over here. This one is active. How many events does it have? 13 on the last 7 days. So it's not like it needs necessarily 50 events in order to pass the learning phase. Let me see others. This is still active also. Let me see this one. We will find the learning limited, I guess. Just give me a second. Not here. So basically over here, it does make sense. It's still on the learning phase. I'm not going to increase the budget here and just take the bait just to, you know, have more past the learning phase, because it doesn't matter. Do you see this one is still on the learning phase and it has 5.6 rows comparing to this one that passed the learning phase and has 3.22. Okay, that's the point. I'm proving whatever I'm telling you, okay? And over here, while in the one case it makes sense, in the other it doesn't. What I'm trying to prove, that it doesn't matter if you're doing the 20% or not. Just think and do an increase based on what makes sense, not necessarily based on the 20% rule everywhere and for every case, no matter what the cost per purchase is, no matter what the ROAS is or whatever. Here, 5.6 ROAS, it means that I can drop more. Why wouldn't I put another, let's say, for example, we have 27, another 50 over here, okay? Which makes total sense to do, okay? Let's go and see another ad account. Let me see if I can find the learning limited to prove to you that there is not a problem, because a lot of you are panicking. Okay, I'm in one that I'm doing cost caps and bid caps, except from the stock issues and stuff. Here we're having learning. These are new campaigns and stuff, so we're not going to criticize them. This is still on the learning with 42 out of 50. It has 3 ROAS. Do you have a problem? No. This one, for example, it has a stock issue, but this one is on learning limited. This is the message that you see. It says 44 conversions, 2.6 ROAS. We need 2 ROAS in this ad account. Even with learning limited, we're getting good results, okay? And here we're having with this one that passed the learning phase, we do have 2.6. Okay, I cannot see the difference between learning phase or not and having problems with it or not. I can see that it doesn't matter, guys. Okay, so if you want to do the 20%, at least do it whenever it makes sense, and just increase the budgets with whatever you see on the average cost per purchase instead of using the 20% rule. I guess that's all that I want to show you. Let's see a little bit of these campaigns on this ad account. For example, over here we have 30 cost per purchase, okay? If we just go into the 400, okay, maybe over here we can increase by, let's say, 30 and 30, 60, 460, okay? Instead of doing a 20%, which is 480. Why would I lose a little bit, okay? Also, I'm having 4 ROAS over here, which is far away from the 2 ROAS that is my target. So I'm going to do another 200 maybe, okay? Let me see what is happening inside my ads. Am I having such strong ads? I'm having a leading ad over here. We're going to see more about optimization with 1.92. Not so thrilled about it. So my opinion has changed again. I'm having a second leading ad. Okay, let's do a little bit of lesson of optimization then. Since you asked, you never asked, but you are going to see it anyway. So, okay, what do we see? So this one is the leading ad with 1.2. Let's see the previous days on how it's behaving. I'm having the sense that something happened over here. This is what happened, okay. So this one was second leading ad, losing from this one. It had a good day over here. Let's see if it was like this before. Yeah, oh, so it was leading ad again. It lost because of that crazy sale over here. This one became leading ad, and now the other one is trying to recover again, become the leading ad, which became here after 1 day of losing. What's the difference? 168, 130. Let's see if it's changing. So 1, 2, but this one goes to 86. So this one is now becoming more strong and more leading. And let's see where we are now. Okay, so this is a campaign that, to be honest with you, I wouldn't increase. It has nothing to do with the 20% and stuff. It has to do with the battle of these two. Until I see that this one is strong, leading ad with 2 rows plus, I wouldn't touch it at all. I might even lower the budget over here, to be honest with you, in order for me to be able to actually control it better and actually help the leading ad, whichever it is, to become leading ad, or I would decide to close one of the two. But this is an optimization method, an optimization lesson that most likely you're going to see on the optimization videos. It would be good to include it there, but it's okay. I included it here so that you can take maybe a taste of what you're going to see in the next optimization lessons, and maybe a hidden secret gem for those that they're not going to see all of the lesson, they are going to lose, you know, another case of optimization over here.